Again, it is good for us to get a little bit of context for our first reading from St. Paul's second letter to the Corinthians. It comes fairly early on in that first chapter in his letter, and he is basically addressing an issue that he is having with the Corinthians, because he acknowledges that he had planned to visit them. He had planned to stop through Corinth as he was passing through, and then to visit them again as he was going in the other direction, but his plans had to change. And so there was some criticism of St. Paul that, well, he's two-faced. He says one thing, but he does another, or maybe he's not trustworthy, or that he was not sincere when he said that he would come to visit us. And Paul is responding to that here early in his letter, and this is part of what we see today. He is saying that, his words and the words that we are called to share with one another are not to be, yes and no, to be duplicitous or to be unsincere, but to be yes, to let that yes of God, especially as he relates it back to God, be always in our hearts, in our minds, and in our actions. And so he speaks about this, acknowledging, and we continue to go through this end of this chapter and into the next chapter, discussing some of those different pieces. But there's this understanding that Paul is saying, I was not insincere, I was true when I spoke to you that I intended to do these things, but that it was ultimately not just expedient for me not to come, or I had other plans, or things worked better for me, but he says it was better for you that I did not come. And he lists off some reasons why this is so. And you can think about, I suppose, again, even as he talks about and relates this back to God, that people could, who make the same claim of St. Paul, that, he was insincere, that he said he would do one thing, but he did another thing. People could make the same claim about God himself. They could say, well, God said that, let there be light, but then half of the day there's darkness. So does he say, well, let's have light, and then he changes his mind and now it's dark? No, he says, well, he breathes life into us. He gives us life. But eventually, we experience sickness or suffering or death itself. Does that mean that God changed his mind? He didn't actually want us to come to life? No. Again, that would be silly to say that or to think that. God is acknowledging that this ultimately is working out for our benefit. We have the sun in the sky, and the earth rotates so that everybody on the face of the earth might have the sun at different times. And it is a benefit for all to have a day and a night and these kind of things. It's in accordance with God's plan. He hasn't changed his mind. The same thing is true with life. God does desire us all to have life, but he desires us especially to have eternal life. And recognizing the penalty of sin and what sin is and how it destroys us in our relationship with God, it affects our physical reality as well. It affects us in the person, and ultimately even that suffering is meant to be used in bringing us to rely on God and on him alone, not on ourselves, for salvation, for eternal life. God has not changed his mind. And Paul is saying here, and again in the rest of this chapter, that there is this reality that the more that we are united with God, the more that we are connected with him and that spirit that he sends, the more we are like Christ, the more our yes will be true, even if it doesn't always come out exactly the way we might have planned or expected, that we might live in that certainty. And he is saying that the same is meant to be true for all of the Corinthians and for all of us. that we are not to be duplicitous. We are not to say one thing and mean another, but that we are to be more closely united with God himself in letting our yes be yes and our no be no. As we go forth, let us not lose sight of that reality. Let us not say one thing and mean something else. Let us not try to appease others even when we know it is not true. But let us live in that truth of God, that God's truth might reign in us, and our yes might always mean yes.